I often think we underestimate Trudeau. We shouldn't. He's a wolf. He's actually smarter than we give him credit for. He's been in power for 10 years. That's not an accident. But there are areas in which he falters. There are areas in which he seriously fumbles, one of those being discussions on economics. Trudeau has no choice but to fumble because his policies are so contrary to rationality and to rational thought that it's impossible to defend them or even explain them using common sense. Here he is at the Halifax Chamber of Commerce trying to do so.
Great. Jumping to the new GST holiday, or potentially GST holiday, I guess, which, as you mentioned,
out here.
HST out here,
15% off
will start on Saturday. Although I think everyone is generally happy that there is going to be a reduction on some of the HST out here, there is some cost to local businesses. Is there anything that can be done to aid smaller local businesses with the unplanned costs of this change?
Well, it would be far better to just cut tax, period. Let's just do that and not make it a political piece of profit, a political piece of bargaining or leverage. Let's just lower business tax. The federal government should lower tax in all areas, and with it, of course, cut their spending and cut it massively.
First of all, I have heard from Canadians across the country who have been very pleased with this measure, because it shows that we're seeing that, yes, people are squeezed, and even with all the different programs and supports, something tangible like a tax break for the next 2 months, when people are standing in grocery stores, looking at their account balance, looking at what's in their baskets, and saying, okay, maybe we're going to have to wait a few days, or we'll have to get more of this when we come back. We're going to do without this week. Do
you think Trudeau's doing that? Do you think he's doing that right now? He's not.
Penny matters. This is going to make a real difference at the end of this year and beginning of next year. For retailers, particularly for restaurants, I know people know this is going to bring a lot more people out for family gatherings a little more regularly, and that's a great thing. And I know
for government, of course, it's a great thing. Can you imagine last year seeing a statistic that said Canadians spent $1 billion on Christmas this year, and then this year it comes out that Canadians only spent $500 million on Christmas this year? Well, that would put a serious bullet in the Liberal narrative that the economy is strong and that it's just a soft landing out of all of the tribulation over the last 4 years, and Canada's doing well. They have this mentality in their mind. The Liberals have this mentality that as long as Canadians are spending, the economy is healthy. Now, that's a lie. I don't believe that for a moment, not for 1 second, but nevertheless, that's what the Liberals believe. That's what the pundits pick up. And so this government has to work their hardest to make sure Canadians keep spending, even in the midst of all of this economic trial. Well, how do you get Canadians to keep spending? You try and make it as cheap as possible to spend, like by removing tax. Curiously, just over the Christmas holidays.
A lot of restaurants in particular are pushing this. Grocery stores already have different classifications. If you're buying prepared food, if you're buying a rotisserie chicken, for example, or whatever, there's GST on those. Right now, all groceries, as of Saturday, will have no GST. And prepared food around the holidays, that's going to make a difference for a whole bunch of people. Now, retailers, I know, will have to recode some of these initiatives, and that's can be a bit of a hassle depending on the level of size and of IT systems that you have.
It's actually a huge cost, but anyways.
CRA has extensive help support and lines and information.
You probably have to wait 3 or 4 hours to hopefully pick up a CRA member, and even then you have to hope that they know what they're doing, which, according to accountants, lots of them don't.
That can help people through that. But I know we're already seeing that there are so many retailers taking advantage of this to publicize it, to draw in more customers at a time where things are slow, particularly in January and into February, that this is going to be something that will hopefully also boost people's confidence and have the sense of, okay, it's okay to be out there and spending on yourself and your kids again, because we've been through the worst of the inflation and interest rates crisis, and we can be optimistic about how Canada is going to be doing in the coming years. And
like there's Trudeau telling you, just go broke. That's what he's saying. He's like, yeah, be confident. Oh, your bank account's small? Don't worry. Just keep spending. Spend as much as you can. Go deep into debt. Spend on your kids. Spend on your family. Spend on your spouse. Do what you wish. No money in the account? Doesn't matter. Pick up a page from the federal government and spend, spend, spend so that we can report our numbers in Canada are strong. You cannot sustain a lie forever.
That's a powerful side effect of giving everyone a break.
I'm going to jump around a fair amount here.
Sure.
So
he also didn't answer the question, but
Premier Houston may not have mentioned this morning that in his campaign, he did link the federal Liberal Party to the provincial Liberal Party and then to the carbon tax. So I'm just wondering, given that the Liberal Party didn't do very well in Nova Scotia in the most recent election, what does that tell you about the current voter thinking about the carbon tax?
It says a lot about the disconnect between what people perceive of as good policy versus what they perceive of as good politics.
No idea what that means. Probably it sounds like an insult, as if you don't really, it's almost as if Trudeau is saying you don't really understand the carbon tax. If you did, you'd vote for it. You'd vote for it if you understood it, but you don't. So it's like maybe Canadians do understand that it makes them poorer.
There are lots of things out there that seem very, very popular to do politically, and people are falling over themselves to try and do them. And we only need to look south of the border to know that very popular policy is sometimes not very good policy.
With Biden, what are you talking about? We're in this negotiating right now with Trump, apparently. That's how we want to play it, hey? Brutal.
We know, we're here for some of the extreme weather events, whether it's fires or more intense hurricanes that you've had over the past few years. We know that there is an absolute unavoidable cost around climate change.
False.
Around the impacts of extreme weather events, on the shifts in...
Well, let's be more specific. Of course, there is a cost to changing weather. Yeah, you have all of these natural disasters. That does impose a serious cost, of course. But the thing that Trudeau is talking about, of course, is trying to justify more government intervention into society. And he acts like his government intervention will decrease the rate of all of these natural disasters, rather than equipping the country to deal best with a hostile weather system, which has always been hostile, which has always been unpredictable. Trudeau prefers to try and instead play God and manipulate the weather as he so chooses, which he can't. And deep down, Trudeau knows it, no doubt about it.
Our global ecosystems that are going to come and make everything harder for everyone over the coming decades.
Hasn't this been preached for how many decades now? Like, we're still waiting.
We know that reducing our emissions is an essential part of making sure that future generations only face the kind of extreme weather events we're living now, not things that are 5 times or 10 times worse than what we live now.
Perfect. We can't predict the weather tomorrow, but decades into the future, yeah, we know. We know how it's going. We can do that. Unbelievable.
That's the future we're looking at right now. But every time we talk about fighting climate change, people say, oh, this is something that's going to make a difference a decade from now or 2 decades from now, and I can't pay for groceries right now. I'm worried about paying my rent right now. I'm worried about my kids' future now.
He's saying this mockingly, and it's an embarrassment and a joke. Are you kidding me? Of course Canadians are worried about right now. What do Canadians care what the weather is like 40 years into the future when they can't feed their children? That's not something to act as though it's foolish. It's not. That isn't. It's a justified concern. You can sense an air of frustration in Trudeau's voice. Why aren't the people getting it? He asks. Why aren't they understanding that this is a serious threat? And it's like, maybe we're focused on trying to meet the rent this month, dear Justin.
And next week, not 20 years from now. It'd be nice if we could do things for 20 years from now, but I need help right now. That's not a new way of thinking. That didn't get invented in the last provincial election. That's been at the core of the challenge of fighting climate change for decades. It's why we signed on to Kyoto and missed the Kyoto targets. Actually taking action on reducing emissions and fighting climate change is hard. So we looked at all the best science, all the top economists around the world who said the best way to reduce emissions is to put a price on the emissions, on the pollution, and that will encourage people to innovate, to think of ways that work for them to reduce their emissions, to create new business models, to be competitive against your neighbors who are continuing to pollute when you clean up, even if it costs you a little more to clean up, because it levels the playing field. A price on pollution is the best way and most efficient way, market-based way to fight climate change. But we said, okay, that's half of it. The other half of it is, even if the most efficient way of fighting climate change is to collect a price on pollution and put it back in the pockets of, put it into innovation and investment and competitive industries to boost that, we didn't do that.
I don't even know what fighting the climate means. I don't think anybody knows. What exactly is that? What exactly is meant by that? When do we reach a state of normality? When do we reach a steady state equilibrium? What does that look like? No natural disasters, because natural disasters have been occurring throughout history. So it can't be that. Is it less natural disasters? But what number is sufficient? What number of natural disasters is acceptable for the Liberal government to finally say we've conquered the climate problem? Nobody knows. Not even the Liberals know. And that's the way it's meant to be. It allows them to carry out this socialist plan indefinitely.
We said we're going to take that price on pollution and we're going to return it to ordinary citizens.
So the classic example of you can have your cake and eat it too, right? We'll take your money, but we'll give it back to you. And in the process, you'll stop polluting.
You may say, well, what's the point of a price on pollution if you're just going to give it back to people? Well, if everyone gets, here in Nova Scotia, about $824 a year from the Canada Carbon Rebate, that's the average price. Now, if you have 3 big mansions with an indoor swimming pool, that $824 a year isn't going to cover that price on pollution. You're choosing to pollute more than we're giving you back for. But if you're a middle-class family, and if you're living in rural areas, we give a 20% top-up because we know you have to drive further to go to school, to drop to school or work. We're giving you that money back. And if you make a decision that reduces the amount of fuel you have to buy, you get a heat pump, for example, where there's a great program to get heat pumps that we're doing across Atlantic Canada, you actually keep more of that $800 that we're sending you because the carbon price will only cost you $700 or $600 or $500 a year. So it's a way of fighting climate change that puts money back in the pockets of people who are on the front lines doing that fighting, ordinary families.
Okay, so here is Trudeau's logic explained, and here are the problems with it. Suppose you have 2 families, family 1 and family number 2. Both families get, let's say, $1,000 every year in a Canada Carbon Rebate. Every year, family 1 and family 2 get $1,000 in Canada Carbon Rebate. Now, let's suppose that family 1 pays $800 in carbon tax every year, be it through driving or some other enterprise or some other activity. So family 1 earns $1,000 back in the carbon rebate, but they pay $800 in carbon tax throughout the year. That means when all is said and done, they have $200 left over. That's theirs. Now let's suppose you take family 2. Family 2 burns absolutely no carbon, not at all. Nope, they have a heat pump in their home and they only walk and all of those things. And so they too get $1,000, but they only spend $100 every year in Canada Carbon Rebate. So when all is said and done, they have $900 left over. Trudeau says this should be an incentive to families to stop using carbon, because if you stop using carbon, you're not paying carbon tax. If you're not paying carbon tax, you get to keep more of that Canada Carbon Rebate, just like family number 2. But there's a problem with Trudeau's logic, and it's that he believes the benefit of not using carbon, of using, let's say, no carbon, and so having an extra $1,000 is greater than the benefits of using carbon and paying a cost to do so, which it's not. So if I'm family number one and I get $1,000 back in Canada carbon rebate, but I pay $800 in carbon tax, I'm still better off using carbon than I would be if I used none of it and had $1,000. That is, my usage of carbon guarantees me a benefit greater than $800. I like heating my home and having a guaranteed heat to my house. I like driving. I like driving a long ways. I like not having to sit at a charger for hours. I like, doing this, that, and the other thing. I like farming. I like that tractors can do with it what they wish. And of course, certain people are exempt from the tax, but nevertheless, I like seeing semis go down the highway, pulling a lot of grain, moving a lot of product for we Canadians. I like those things, and carbon gives me that benefit. So, even though family number two is better off, family number one certainly doesn't think so. He certainly doesn't think so, or they don't think so, because carbon gives them a quality of life they otherwise wouldn't be able to enjoy, and that's not immoral. That's excellent. That's a wonderful thing.
That's the policy. It just took me 4 minutes to explain it to all of you. And in politics these days, we don't have 4 minutes nearly often enough. We're not having real conversations around politics now. We're having, 7-second TikTok videos. We're having a bumper sticker or a flag that's waving when I'm around. That's political discourse and debate. Of course, it's easy to say, tax is bad. Sorry, I don't know why I sounded like Frankenstein when I was doing that, but okay.
Because he thinks those individuals who believe in free markets and low taxes are imbeciles who can't think. That's why. It's derogatory. That's why he spoke like that.
But having conversations about how we actually solve the challenges we're facing in this world in thoughtful ways, how we reduce our emissions and support hardworking families, that's a more complex answer than my opponents actually want you to have, want you to actually reflect on. And I remain confident that if Canadians really understand that there is a clear choice to be made about the kind of country we want to live in, do we bring everything we're doing to fight climate change to a screeching halt? Because that's what's on offer from the Conservatives.
Yep, sure hope we do. That would be wonderful. I don't actually believe the Conservatives would do that, but the actual thought of it is just wonderful. That would be excellent. Maybe we could focus on real issues then, like the moral problem in the country, the fact that we have crime abounding in the streets, the fact that there's chaos all over our big cities. Maybe we could focus on those issues.
No plan to fight climate change. I wonder how many people will actually choose that. Because right now, however unpopular it may seem, our price on pollution is part of the most successful plan to fight climate change that is bending the curve on our emissions faster than any of our peer countries.
We also have to change the narrative. Trudeau is acting like, and he's doing a good job of it, he acts like fighting this climate issue is a moral issue. It's not. It is grossly immoral what Justin Trudeau is doing. It is hideously immoral. To take away the rights and the ability of a family to heat their home easily and cheap, to drive cheap, and to do all of these things which increase our quality of life in the name of fighting an enemy who will never be defeated is immoral. It's wrong. We are not wrong for saying we don't believe in this and that we should see low taxes, that we should have freer markets, that we shouldn't spend our time in this socialist enterprise trying to worship Gaia. We're not wrong for that. That isn't immoral. What Trudeau's doing is immoral. And the narrative has to be switched to reflect that.
We are a significant oil and gas producer and will continue to be.
Don't believe you. Not if you keep doing what you're doing.
For a number of years as the world continues to rely on it.
We would love to, but of course, with Trudeau's policies, how are we supposed to continue on? Our industry is being actively crushed, and it's insulting that Trudeau would make a statement like that, in a sort of false support for an industry which holds up Canada.
but it's allowing us to innovate, to invest in hydrogen, in more nuclear, in small nuclear modular reactors, in renewables, in wind, in offshore wind, in the kinds of things that we know the world is going to be using 100 years from now. We know that. 100 years from now, we'll all...
We actually don't. Only fools can claim to predict what's going to happen 100 years into the future. Who would do that? Who has a clue? You know, there's a good story years and years ago about a man talking about how in the next few years, coal is going to be, you know, it's going to stay forever and ever. And then here comes oil. And it's like, oh, wait a second. Actually, there's a more efficient fuel for certain things. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, happen 100 years. We know what's going to be here. We don't have a clue. Not a clue, Trudeau.
All be on renewables or on some magic form of fusion that has been invented. Right now, we're not there yet. Question is, do we get to lead on our way there and reap the benefits of leading on that? Or do we get dragged along kicking and screaming by the folks who are focused on maximizing profits for the old way of doing things while they can and leaving the mess to be cleaned up by somebody else?
Yeah. Socialist Trudeau here thinks like acting or thinks that maximizing profits is an inherently sinister thing. It's not. We like maximizing profits because it proves that society wants that particular good. It's a signal to producers that people want a lot of this. So keep producing it, keep making it, and expand. We want more of it to bring down the cost. No, that's a bad thing, says Trudeau. Yeah, we'll just let a central government tell us what we're supposed to invest in and what we're supposed to use. That's worked so well throughout history for the common man.
That's not the way Canadians think about their future. That's not the ambition we need for the country. So that was the answer on the carbon tax.
Okay.
Seems like a stiff audience. Yeah. Rightfully so.
Federal government's recently made significant cuts to the number of permanent residents and international students. Halifax is a university economy. There's a lot of students. There's a lot of universities. Can Ottawa consider allowing additional international students in Halifax? For some universities, this is now creating a structural deficit. And I know universities aren't necessarily a federal problem, but is there a way to help the universities a little more by allowing some additional international students?
The situation we are in on immigration traces back to the pandemic. For 2 years...
So the short answer should be no. Canada should help Canadians first. It's not a difficult concept. It's a critical concept. That's the way every country is supposed to work. You reside in a country is loyal, that's who's supposed to help. Canadians come first in Canada. That to me makes sense. The country is called Canada. So Canadians ought to come first, protecting Canadian interests and so on. That makes sense to me. But of course, if we were to watch the entire thing, we would see Trudeau give a political answer that says really, just like every other answer, nothing at all.